It is with pleasure that we welcome Andrew Tobias, who is the RNC reporter for Cleveland.com, to the dais this evening, and Andrew will introduce all of our panelists. He is a politics reporter who has been assigned to cover the Republican National Convention. He has written about local, state, and federal government for newspapers in Dayton and Delaware, Ohio. He is a lifelong Ohio resident and a 2008 graduate of Otterbein University in Westerville. He lives in Ohio City with his wife Chelsea and 2 orange cats. So please join me in welcoming Andrew Tobias.
Thank you. So I can't remember the actual date. I think it was mid-July 2014, but I'll never forget what happened. I'd been following Cleveland's efforts to get the Republican National Convention kind of for a while. I know I wasn't especially putting a lot of hope into getting it. I guess it just kind of seemed like something that our officials were doing, and lo and behold, we were named a finalist. So then the day that we actually got the convention, I'd pre-written a story just in case we got it picked, and I pre-wrote another story just in case it was the wrong way. And kind of ultimately to my surprise, we got the convention. The only reason I say surprise is just I almost expect that fun and exciting things don't happen in Cleveland that often. But then later that week, LeBron James came back to Cleveland too. So it was a very exciting week to live in Cleveland. It's turned into a very exciting couple of years that since then, and little did we know how much more exciting things would yet become. Donald Trump has emerged as the presumptive nominee for the party. He is a candidate unlike any that I can remember in recent history. He's exciting, he's controversial, so this convention has been a great assignment for me, and I think everybody here who's on the stage with me, it's been a really interesting project for them too. So we're going to talk a little bit about basically, I guess, the ins and outs of the RNC, what it means for Cleveland. I have some fun figures. It's expected to attract 50,000 people to Cleveland. That's expected to an estimated $200 million plus in direct spending. You might add that up a little bit if it either ends up exceeding that or possibly even multiplying when it runs through the course of the economy. There's also going to be traffic closures. It's going to affect day-to-day life for people who live and work downtown. It's going to be hugely in the spotlight of the national and international community. There's going to be 15,000 credentialed members of the media here. There's going to be untold numbers of protesters. I've avoided using a number on that. At past conventions have been upwards of 10,000 to maybe even 100,000, although that was in New York City, which is kind of, they do everything bigger there. But and then there's $50 million that's being spent from the federal government on security. There's $64 million that the host committee that's hosting the event is raising. I have 16,000 hotel rooms are being locked up for this thing officially, not to mention those who might be going outside of official channels. And then one Donald Trump will be here too. So I'd like to take the opportunity to introduce my speakers. First, to my immediate right and to your left is Henry Gomez. He is the I guess he's not the John Kasich reporter for Cleveland.com, right?
Not anymore.
He's the chief political reporter, I think is the title that we decided on. And then to his right is Diane Downing. She is the chief operating officer for the Cleveland 2016 Host Committee, which is the nonpartisan organization that initially attracted the RNC and bid for it. And now that it's here, they have to fulfill on the terms of their bid. And then finally on the end is Chris McNulty. He is the director of community and political affairs for the Committee on Arrangements, which is the actual committee that the Republican National Party set up here. So it's the Committee on Arrangements set up by the Republican National Committee. But he is actually basically works for the Republican Party. And so if each of you could kind of just go across, I guess starting with Chris, can you tell us kind of what you do and how you ended up here working on this project?
Yeah, I kind of to dovetail off what you said, where were you when Cleveland got the convention? My last immediate job, I was political director at the Republican National Committee, living in Washington, D.C. with my family for 2013, 2014. And I also happened to be in Ohio, and I actually went to John Carroll right down the street. I was in my office, and the funny thing is all those folks in front that were going out in the site selection committee knew I was from Cleveland, and they kept coming back, and they kept having these great comments. So yeah, I was in my office, and it was that point in time I said, this is a good time for me to move home and come back to Ohio, come back to Cleveland. And so what I do for the convention is really a dream come true. I get to promote 2 of the things I care very deeply about, Cleveland and the Republican National Committee of the Republican Party. And my role in particular, besides being on senior staff at the Committee on Arrangements, is to frankly make sure that we are good neighbors in this process. The convention is this big, unruly thing, sometimes mystic thing, with a lot of kind of rumors swirling around it. But we understand that we are, we're basically a $64 million corporation that comes to town, sets up, shuts down, hires 70, ultimately about 100, 120 people in the course of a year, and then we go away. We are sitting in an extremely important part of the state, as electorally speaking, so we want to make sure that we're good neighbors. We leave a positive impression besides the business and everything else that we bring to Cleveland, and my job is to help facilitate that, if you will.
Great. I'm Diane Downing, and I'm the Chief Operating Officer for the Cleveland 2016 Host Committee, as Andrew mentioned, and he also said that we are the 501c3, the nonpartisan group. So when a city is awarded a convention, they sign, their leadership of the host committee signs an agreement that says they will fulfill certain things as part of bringing the convention to their city. So the host committee, as Andrew said, we are responsible for raising $64 million to put on this convention. We also are responsible for recruiting 8,000 volunteers, and I'm happy to say we have hit that mark. And those volunteers will be assigned to the hotels that house delegations. We'll also have volunteers at the airport greeting folks to welcoming them to Cleveland, and also on Euclid Avenue as wayfinders to help folks get around. We were also responsible for securing the 16,000 hotel rooms that have now been assigned to the different delegations, and we also recruited 68 venues for the RNC to assign to different groups for breakfasts, luncheons, and parties after the formal session is over. And we work very closely with the Committee on Arrangements. We sign contracts on their behalf so that they can put on the convention, specifically the work that needs to be done at the convention venue, the queue. It will look nothing like it will look tonight. It will look completely different when the RNC is in session. So we work with them on that. We also work with them coordinating with the media who will be housed at the convention center and then have a shuttle over to the queue. And we work on everything from transportation contracts to gift bags. So it's, the way I like to look at it is it's sort of like welcoming guests to your home. You want them to have everything they need to have a good time. You want them to remember it as enjoyable and memorable, and that's what we're endeavoring to do here. And as a community, it's enabled us to accelerate some civic projects that have been on the books for a long time, like Public Square, which is almost done and looks fantastic. And so it's all about, as I said, our guests having a good time when they arrive in about 60 days.
You know, like Andrew, I was surprised that Cleveland won the convention, but I was surprised for a different reason. I had a rock-solid source tell me a month or a few weeks before the final announcement that Cleveland had actually been eliminated from contention. They were about to make their next cut of cities. You know, it starts out with 6 or 8 cities in the mix, and Cleveland kept making the cut. And it was a feel-good story because Cleveland had gone through this revitalization downtown. It had a new convention center to show off, and the National Republican Party was really trying to make inroads in the inner city and in Ohio because it's such a big state. Well, the second to last cut, the chairman of the Ohio Republican Party, Matt Borges, told me it's not good news. I found out this morning it's not good news. We're not going to make the cut. We're not going to make the cut to the finals. And a few hours later, Cleveland made the cut to the finals. So Matt told me he's never been more happy to be wrong about something. So anyhow, I still just had this feel around it that this isn't really going to happen. So the day that they made the announcement, I was actually in Hamilton, Ohio, for the kickoff of John Kasich's re-election campaign as governor, and Andrew was manning the store back in Cleveland, and I think I probably told him that he would use the version of the story about Cleveland not getting the convention, and I'm sitting there in a warehouse waiting for Governor Kasich to speak when the news breaks, and I think he was on the phone with Reince Priebus, the chairman of the RNC, before he took the stage at that event, and it was an exciting day, and it's been, like Andrew said, an exciting few years. Unpredictable. The start of John Kasich's re-election campaign was, for all intents and purposes, the start of his presidential campaign that he would launch, less than a year later. He won by a very decisive margin. He had a good story to tell, and I went with that story for as long as it took me, and it ran out about 2 weeks ago when he suspended his presidential campaign. A lot of fun to cover a presidential campaign up close like that. The Cleveland convention and then the Philadelphia convention for Democrats a week later will be my third and fourth political conventions. I covered the Republicans in Tampa 4 years ago, and I covered the Democrats in Charlotte. So it's going to be very interesting for me to see up close how Cleveland host a convention, as I'm sure it'll be for everybody else who's been to a number of these. It'll, Chris, I'm sure for you, being a hometown guy, it has that extra level of excitement for you. So it's fun. As Andrew said, Donald Trump adds an even bigger level of intrigue. I mean, it's not just the biggest political story of the year, but it's probably the biggest story in the world right now, and it's an honor to be a part of it.
So, Chris, I can't remember your exact words, but you said something interesting about Northeast Ohio, or maybe Ohio generally, being an politically important area. Can you talk about to what extent maybe the politics may have weighed into Cleveland being picked, or if not, what was the reason that Cleveland was picked for this thing?
Yeah, it's a little bit of this. Cleveland or Ohio is important politically. Cleveland being 7.5% of all or Cuyahoga County being 7.5% of all the votes in the state make it even that more important. Having said that, conventions are first and foremost a business decision for the committees. How political factors actually play in way down the line. You have to be able to raise enough money. You have to have enough hotel rooms. You have to have the right amount of venues, and you have to have a convention hall space that is modern and equipped to handle a modern day convention. Somewhere after that comes political considerations, and frankly, pretty far down the line. But Cleveland, as to why, Cleveland first and foremost met those business requirements. But frankly, a lot of cities meet those business. Dallas was bidding, Denver was bidding, and others that have hosted conventions in the past. They all meet those requirements as well. Where Cleveland really, I think, differentiated itself was the people and the palpable desire on everyone from the mayor on down to the cab drivers that our site selection committee folks would come back and said, these guys want it. These folks want this thing, and it's a big endeavor. So you want to feel comfortable with people that you're shoulder to shoulder with trying to pull off a Herculean effort, and everybody in Cleveland made us feel that way, or made the committee feel that way, and I think that's why we came.
I remember when the Republican debate was here in August to kick off the primary season, even hearing just the guys who are manning the surface parking lots or the parking garages or whatever, who'd normally be talking about, I guess it'd be the Indians at that time of year, they're talking about the Republicans, so I have seen that this event has permeated sort of in an interesting way.
There's representatives of the California delegation in our office today, and I talked to some of them before I left, and they're a perfect example. They said, we can't believe how much the energy and how nice is everybody here, and this is that particular group's first trip to Cleveland to check out the sites and where they're going to do their events and such.
And then, Diane, you mentioned during your opening that the convention has kind of catalyzed a lot of projects. Can you talk a little bit about some of the things that we've seen, I guess, kind of either spring up or that there's still the orange barrels out for, but we hope will be done by the time that July 18 rolls around?
Well, there's been a great deal of capital investment in our community over the last several years. Certainly, as Chris said, you need to have world-class facilities in order to host a convention. As you know, we have a new convention center, the Global Health Center. The Q is a great facility, but it's accelerated improvements road improvements, bridge improvements, a lot of capital investment in University Circle that was going on but was completed and quite attractive to the site selection committee. And the airport will be done. I want to just say that, put that right out there. The airport will be done before the convention, I am assured by the city of Cleveland. But again, those improvements were also sparked by us hosting the convention. So it's been literally billions of dollars in public improvements that have occurred across greater Cleveland over the last several years, and will help to welcome our guests.
So Henry, you've covered a few political conventions by now. What's it like to actually be at one? You know, what do you, kind of transposing your experiences in Charlotte and Tampa, how do you see that kind of living through it in Cleveland?
Well, at first I thought I'd probably get to sleep in my own bed every night, but I don't know if that's going to work. I live about a half hour outside of the city, and so I really did appreciate that offer to bunk in your spare room in Ohio City for the week, and I'm sure Chelsea was really excited about that offer too. But you know, at first I admit I was a little bummed, only because it meant one less trip I got to go on this year, but I think it's going to be really, you know, it's during the debate, I saw how this would work a little bit. You know, my friends from other newspapers and websites would, you know, start inundating my inbox with, you know, places to recommend for dinner and for breakfast and stuff like that, and, you know, what sites to check out. So I guess it's kind of fun to be a tour guide to some of the people I see throughout the year on the campaign trail. But, you know, really, I'll be interested to see how Cleveland handles logistics. It's a very difficult undertaking. Tampa had some significant snafus with busing. You know, to bus those delegations back to their hotels at night is a huge undertaking. And one night, it was a disaster in the parking lot outside of the arena, and the delegates were not happy. I think some of them didn't get back to their hotel rooms until 3 a.m. I and a reporter from the Columbus Dispatch actually, you know, we were supposed to take the bus back. I think we walked a mile outside of the security perimeter to eat dinner, and then took a $40 cab ride back to our hotel. So please, for the sake of my friends, get that worked out. I remember Reince Priebus had a lot to answer for the next morning after that. But you know, it is exciting. You know, my family lives in Youngstown, and even there, as far away as Youngstown, they're very excited about the convention. I have friends asking if they could come and stay with me for a week. I don't really know what they expect to see without having, you know, credentials or, you know, floor pass or whatever. But there is that excitement. So it's kind of cool. It gives me something to talk about at family parties that isn't related to Donald Trump, so that's very good.
So kind of the topic for tonight is what, I guess, impact this event will have on Cleveland. So I think there's kind of different parts of that. So just kind of to start off on the smallest part, or maybe like the shortest term part, what's on a day-to-day basis, what's this going to mean for life in Cleveland? I don't know who might be able to best handle that, but people who live downtown, people who work downtown. I know that I live in Ohio City. Our office is in Midtown on the other side of downtown, and I don't know how I'm going to get to work. I'm thinking about maybe riding my bike. I'm not really sure yet. So,
well, you want to go first?
Okay, so there's really two ways to talk about it. There's people that live downtown and normal commuting and such, and the life of Cleveland as the convention happens. I think the important thing, there's a lot of talk about, well, we're closing our business or we're not coming downtown, and I think a lot of that is overblown. I mean, there's individual decisions to be made, but the fact of the matter is the average day in the life of a delegate is that they are going to wake up in whatever hotel cluster they are in, whatever hotel they are in, and that basically will range from downtown to Western Lake County out here in Beechwood, down to Akron Fairlawn, Avon Lake, Crocker Park area, and yes, Kalahari. And by the way, the executive director of the California Party I talked to her today about 40 minutes ago. She is thrilled. They are thrilled. They love the Kalahari.
We took her somewhere nice for lunch.
We're taking her to dinner as well, but that's beside the point. But the average day starts in your hotel, wherever that is. So when everybody is commuting to downtown Cleveland normally, those delegations will be in their hotels and not moving. You're not going to run into a lot of bus traffic or a lot of convention-related traffic on your morning commute to downtown, because those folks will be in their hotels having what is tradition, our delegation breakfasts. There's then a little bit of downtime, sightseeing, and do whatever you like throughout the course of the day. Then about 3 o'clock, the delegates will get in buses and head to a pre-convention event that will be somewhere between their hotel and the queue. If that is not in walking distance, they'll get back on the bus and go to the convention itself. They'll then go to a post-convention event and then back out. So as far as commuting in downtown is concerned, convention flow is opposite what normal rush hour flow is in and out of the city. So I don't think you'll get a lot of additional traffic as a result with your normal commute. Downtown, there'll just be more people. Every one of the hotels will be completely full. All the restaurants and bars, or a good number of them, and different sites will be full. It'll feel a lot, I think, on any given night, a lot like it's going to feel tonight with the Cavs game. A lot of people, and Indians game at the same time. A lot of people milling around, a lot of people having a good time, and but frankly, very, very good for Cleveland, and I don't think all that disruptive.
Yeah, and I would say, as Chris said, as we meet with businesses downtown, it is an individual business decision what they're going to do that week. But there is the opportunity, because of the delegate daily schedule and people's normal work schedule, that you come into work at the same time. Maybe you leave a bit earlier to avoid the buses that are coming downtown. But that's up to you. I mean, when there's a water main break or something, you find an alternate route to get to your office. That may happen with some of the road closures, but tomorrow we're going to be faced with road closures downtown with the filming of the movie. So people adjust, but this is really a once in a lifetime experience for Cleveland, for Northeast Ohio, for all of us who are working to put it on. So I would encourage you to be part of it as either a volunteer or as someone who comes down to just observe it or observe the folks. You can't go into the arena, but to see what's happening in downtown Cleveland. So it's going to be very exciting. And the other thing to keep in mind is that the state legislature last year extended alcohol service hours until 4 in the morning. So as Chris said, I can certainly say there won't be a lot of movement at 7 a.m. So
I'd like to point out that bars within less than a fifth of a mile from both my office and my home have applied for the 4 a.m. sales, so I'm optimistic.
You're good to go. One other thing to add is that it's commendable. You mentioned Tampa. A lot of the lessons, we studied a lot of the lessons from Tampa, whether it be busing and a variety of things. And one of the things that's commendable that the city has done, the host committee sits on, the committee on arrangement sits on, and the Secret Service is something called the Business Impact Committee, where monthly now we are getting together with downtown residents and businesses to answer in minute detail their questions about, can I get deliveries? Typically I get them on Euclid. Now I have to get them on the other side of the street and such, to make adjustments for residents downtown, for businesses downtown, all working together. And that's been going on now for six months. Yeah, 6 months. So we're very cognizant of our neighbors downtown and making sure they get what they need.
So I mentioned earlier that I try to avoid making written estimates of the numbers of protesters, but that's informed by the fact that leading into Tampa in 2012, the authorities were saying we expect, and I don't know, I guess maybe the media just said it, 10,000 protesters at least, and then as it turned out, about 800 people showed up, and a big part of that was there was a hurricane that rolled in, and they declared a state of emergency in the state, and that kind of made it hard to get there for those people. But also, you never really know what's going to happen with that kind of thing. I think that people weren't as politically agitated then, especially the type of people who might protest. But this all leads me around to say, what can we expect, and what's being done, I guess, to both make sure that people have their right to protest and they're able to do it in a way that's reasonably orderly and doesn't completely overwhelm downtown, while also keeping people safe in case somebody has a bad idea to do something like that.
Well, I hesitate to respond because that's really the city of Cleveland's purview, and they are very hard at work in developing the planning for that. Chief Williams and Deputy Chief Ed Tomba will have the daily leadership on that. But I think they've done a wonderful job with their management team as they handled, albeit smaller issues, but issues of protest in the immediate past. So I think there will be, with their leadership, the opportunity for folks to express their First Amendment rights, but also to, to keep everyone safe.
Yeah, and Andrew, I mean, you and I have talked about it, but I think that the national media has probably overblown some of the, drip of City of Cleveland purchased this today, and you've been doing a great job covering a lot of that. But the news that the Cleveland is ordering more riot gear, I think at the national level has been written more in a context of Donald Trump, when this is, from what I understand, not uncommon for, they're not buying necessarily any more than would have been bought in the past. It doesn't have anything to do with Donald Trump, although I do think that adds an element of unpredictability. It may raise the level of people that want to be heard and want to demonstrate and want to take advantage of their First Amendment rights, because he is a very controversial figure. I think Tampa was very well controlled. I think they had a very good security plan in place. There was some controversy about it because there were those in the protest community that felt that it was blockaded too much to discourage that. What I've heard from Cleveland Mayor Frank Jackson is that they're going to make sure the demonstrators have space to do those things. I think that the environment this year is different than it was 4 years ago, not just in the presidential race, but here in Cleveland. We've been, in some cases, at the forefront of the Black Lives Matter movement with the Tamir Rice case, and I could see that potentially being a rallying cry for some of the demonstrators. So it's possible, but it does seem like the city is going to be well prepared.
So just something else, I guess I mentioned that we're talking about the sort of immediate impacts. There's sort of like the more short term, but still a little bit longer term comparatively of what this might mean for Cleveland. And so you mentioned you're kind of touching on things that have to do with the city's image. So what are you guys hearing as far as when you said that there are people here coming to Cleveland today for the first time? What do they think about the city? And then, what do you feel like this event might mean for Cleveland's image in a more long-term sense?
Well, I hearken back to, again, sitting in my office in D.C., and I had about 120 20-somethings that worked for me across the country as political director. And as a Clevelander, I can say this, their collective response when Cleveland was named, because we're up against Vegas and a couple other places, these are 20-somethings, we're like, wow, got to go to Cleveland. And now, they'd never been here before. In fact, we estimate that somewhere in the neighborhood of 80 or 90% of the 50,000 people that come for the convention will have never been to Cleveland. And they're going to come with the same, misnomers and that Cleveland have lived with for a while. This, however, is an immeasurable branding opportunity for Cleveland and a reset for Cleveland, because all those people are going to come in with, I think many of them will come in with a low expectation, particularly if they haven't been here. Then they, like the folks from California today, are going to say, wow, the people are great, the sites are great, I'm enjoying myself, it's way more than I expected. The difference is at the convention is that you're going to have 15,000 members of the media and every amount of social media available to those folks pumping out that positive message across the country exponentially. And there is no way to measure how much positive rebranding message of Cleveland can get done as a result of 50,000 people all saying that same thing over and over again in every medium possible. So I think it'll be what happened to California, it'll just be times 50,000.
And, I agree with everything you've said, and we have, this really is our opportunity to hit the reset button. We are not the city of 30 or 40 years ago. We are we are Cleveland 2016. And if we look at this convention as just 4 days in July, and certainly there'll be incredible economic impact with $200 million flowing into the greater Cleveland area, then if we look at it as only 4 days, we've really missed the point. The opportunity here is to position ourselves for the next 5 to 10 years, not only for increased convention business, but also for greater economic development. So the impressions that the California delegation has, that the media who have come in to look at their spaces have had, the positive feedback we've gotten, that will all play into repositioning Cleveland. Now, I'm not going to say that we are a perfect community. We are not trying to say that to anyone, but we are facing our challenges, we are working on them, and that's also part of the message that we want to convey to the delegates and the RNC folks who come in, but also to the 15,000 members of the press and the media who will be here.
And so Henry, and we've obviously discussed this kind of internally as we're kind of shaping our coverage and stuff like that. How much do you expect that the media will be covering Cleveland as a community as opposed to obsessing over the minutia of the rules committee or, that kind of stuff?
It's a really good question. And just speaking from my own personal experience, I didn't have a whole lot of time to go sightseeing in Tampa as much as I would have liked to. I think I did have one afternoon that I was able to go eat lunch in the one really cool Cuban neighborhood, and in Charlotte didn't get to do any sort of fun stuff. And I think it's a little bit different for the media. We have you're working the whole time, and what you'll basically see is your workspace in the convention center, your seat in the queue, and your hotel bed at night if you're lucky. And I do think the opportunity is more for the delegates. They have more of a structured day, as Chris was describing earlier. They'll have some downtime or sightseeing time built into their day. And it's not exactly fair to the people that put so much work into making the city look nice and having all this extra stuff for people to do. The things that the media are going to notice most are the airport, the navigation of the streets downtown, and the restaurants. And we have the restaurants definitely working in our favor in Cleveland. And as long as all the downtown, street construction clears up, that'll be working in Cleveland's favor. The airport, Diane mentioned, will be done. And I know that that'll make a lot of people happy because when some of my colleagues were in for the debate in August, they found the airport to be the most frustrating part of their visit. So those are definitely some improvements that'll be noticed by the other reporters who are in town. I think that bigger publications, the magazines and the large national dailies, like say the New York Times, are the types of publications, and some of the television and cable networks are the ones that would perhaps devote a reporter, a non-political reporter, like a features writer or a travel writer, to come into Cleveland. I think there's even been some outreach on your part to bring some of those reporters into Cleveland to see it, because the entire world's going to be watching, and they're going to want a perspective that's apolitical, that doesn't have to do with what's happening on the floor or what Donald Trump is saying. And so, I'm speaking from a very narrow framed, regional reporter who got to go to a couple of conventions 4 years ago. So there will be opportunity for the national story to be told.
So something I wanted to ask then finally is kind of what the long-term impact of this might be. And we've been talking about the day-to-day stuff, and I think the image, the potential there to reshape it kind of weighs into that. But is there anything else that we haven't gone over that long-term that this event might mean to Cleveland?
Well, I think, as I said, to position ourselves for greater opportunities, more opportunities to bring large conventions here, because this is 50,000 people. So if we can do this right, I think other folks, other groups will see that we can do other conventions in a really first-class way. But again, it's, how do we position Cleveland for greater economic development? And that's something that we will also be working on during the convention and after that.
Yeah, it's definitely that pickup. It's conventions for sure, future conventions, but with all those people and the variance in the average delegation, you'll have extraordinarily successful business people down to grassroots activists as part of every delegation. they're seeing Cleveland for the first time. You never know what kind of opportunity is going to come out of that. Who said I should invest here? I should move here. Here's another outlet for my company. What have you? All of those things are on the table. I think the opportunity for Cleveland is far more about the day after the convention and what has been left than it is necessarily being in full capacity for a week or two there.
I agree with everything that they both just said. I think there's probably I'll play my part as the cynical reporter and say that there's a risk. I mean, when you hear Chicago 1968, you don't think of a good convention, and if something goes wrong, there's the risk that Cleveland will not be remembered so fondly. And I hate to bring it up, but there's definitely concern about that this year, given who the presumptive nominee is and some of the statements he's made about what his supporters could do here. Now, that the concern about that seems to have alleviated some now that he's the presumptive nominee, and there probably won't be a serious challenge to his nomination in the Rules Committee or in the committees that will convene here before the actual roll is called. But that's the high risk and the high reward that you get from hosting a convention, and a lot of it's stuff that you can't control or you can't plan for. But it's a great opportunity for the city, and if Cleveland shows itself off well, it'll be great publicity for years to come.
But no pressure here. There's no pressure here. Okay.
So, go ahead, Chris.
One fun fact, talk about pressure and media exposure that we didn't mention. I think people had said 15,000 members of the media. For context, it is the second biggest media event in the world behind a Summer Olympics, to give you some context. The amount of media exposure, media there. So even bigger than the Winter Olympics, just smaller than a Summer Olympics. So when you talk about media exposure, to give you some scope, that's a good way to, at least that's how I try to perceive it.
So the calendar on this thing has been kind of unusual. One of the things that the Republicans really set out for this particular cycle was that they wanted to have an earlier race. Doing that allowed them to focus on picking whoever they're going to nominate for the president, and then they can move on to raising money for the general election. And so what we saw here was an earlier date than usual than what we see. And then we also saw the prospect of there being weeks and weeks passing without a nominee really being clear. And we're even preparing, all of us were, I'm sure, for the possibility that the convention might arrive without a presidential nominee being clear. So how did that affect the planning, Chris, as you guys were, trying to put this together?
Very quick backstory on why we moved it earlier. It was a political decision to move it from typically when it's been August in the modern era back to July. The Chairman Priebus would have actually liked to have moved it into June. Now, the reason we moved it back as far as we would is because there in the presidential election, there's two pots of money. There's a primary pot of money for the nominee, for the candidates, and a general election pot of money for the nominee. The scenario in the last presidential election was that our nominee, in that case, presumptive nominee, Mitt Romney, had run through a brutal primary, had basically spent all his primary dollars, and had no dollars available to him to start fighting back for the general election until literally stands up there and says, I, Mitt Romney, accept the nomination of the Republican Party. We actually moved that nomination speech, if you recall or go back and look, from Thursday night to Wednesday night in Tampa, so the Romney campaign could have 24 hours to tap into that general election dollars. That's how desperate it was. So Chairman Priebus, from a political perspective, says we will probably be in the same scenario, big, long, brutal primary, running out of dollars, kind of a presumptive incumbent in Hillary Clinton. We should move our convention back so that we have a longer amount of time to legally spend general election dollars. It was strategic. Now, the reason it wasn't quicker, or back even further, was what happened 4 days after Cleveland was named, and that was LeBron James came back to Cleveland. So we had to calculate in when a Game 7 would be of a playoffs, and then have the requisite minimum amount of time to get the queue prepared. Typically, we have 6 weeks to prepare a convention center. If LeBron and the Cavs go to Game 7 against the Thunder, which they would have home court advantage, that Game 7 could possibly be in Cleveland and give us the minimum 3 weeks that are there. That's the full story.
politically speaking, it was a very smart decision for the Republicans to move up their convention date, because if you recall, in that interim period back in 2012, the interest groups supporting President Obama's reelection, they ran some fairly effective ads against Mitt Romney during that time that really served to define him in a way, fairly or unfairly, that weakened him, I think, as a general election candidate. And Romney was not able to fight back at that point. He had, gone through a longer than expected primary with, Rick Santorum and Newt Gingrich. And, it is interesting because just a few weeks ago, we were all, working on our contested convention masterpiece stories. And here we are.
They're great, too.
Oh, my gosh. I wish you could see mine and Andrew's. But now here we are on May 17th, May 18th. And Donald Trump is the presumptive Republican nominee. And Hillary Clinton is the Democratic frontrunner. But she's still, as we speak, slugging it out in Kentucky and Oregon with Bernie Sanders.
In Nevada, literally slugging it out.
Right. Yeah. So the Republicans have a nominee now, and the Democrats technically don't. I mean, it's going to be Hillary.
And I have to use this opportunity. Henry, do you remember when we were in Columbus, we had this forum, I said it's very possible that the Democrats will not be decided before we are decided, and that's actually what happened.
I think I laughed at you when he said that, and I'm eating a lot of humble pie and crow right now, so...
So I've got a question here from the audience, and I'm terrible at reading cursive, but it says... in talking with people before the RNC, did many express an interest in seeing the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame? And then what was the most popular venue mentioned that people say that they want to see?
I think so.
Yeah, I mean, that's the one that literally everybody got to go to the Rock Hall. The other thing that gets mentioned, not Cleveland specific, California mentioned it, and they have people that want to go from, as Ohioans, you'll appreciate this travel, from the Kalahari to the National Football Hall of Fame in Canton. I'm like, that is a trip. You think Cleveland's a trip? That's really a trip. But certainly the Rock Hall jumped out, and then frankly, some of the restaurants, in particular, you could thank the Food Network for a lot of that stuff. But the Michael Simon and such is a nationally known brand, and they know he's from Cleveland, and some of those restaurants pop up. But definitely the Rock Hall.
So next question here, what will comprise the secured area around the arena? And this is kind of like the $10 million question, right?
We don't know that yet, and we won't know until very close to the convention. So
I think I have some ideas. Like, I'm not going to, I don't want to get it wrong, but I think it's fair to say that it will surround the arena, but other than that.
Give or take 2 miles.
Right. Beyond that, we're not really sure. Typically, it does get announced a month to 6 weeks before the convention happens. Hopefully, I know that's the story that all the reporters in town are trying to figure out. I've talked to a lot of people. I've heard a lot of conflicting things. But definitely, that will impact people because being inside that zone will affect the level of security that you have to do just to transact business, much less get into the convention itself. So I wanted to ask about the fundraising for this thing. We've mentioned that as I was conceiving this event, and as Henry and I think, and I can speak for us just because I know what we do on a day-to-day basis, the best. We're wondering, we're conceiving just kind of like a normal generic Republican convention and kind of like a traditional or conventional candidate. Donald Trump is an unconventional candidate. He's, like as I said earlier, and I don't need to say this stuff, people know this, he's exciting, but he's also very controversial even within the Republican Party. So one of the things that the host committee has been tasked with is to raise money for this event. So I wanted to ask, Diane, if you can talk about your fundraising efforts and to what extent has Donald Trump affected that?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, as the selected city, we said that we would raise $64 million to put on the convention. And we are about $8 million short of that right now. We are continuing our efforts both nationally and locally. We have fundraisers who work on that on a daily basis. We have, to date, raised more money than any other host city has in the past. And as I said, we're continuing to work on it. We really, we haven't seen very much from, quote, the Trump effect. but we're continuing to, to work on it. And as we now have a presumptive nominee, that nominee has supporters, and we're reaching out to them to make a donation to the host committee.
I know I didn't exactly build up his credentials earlier, but I spoke with Ohio Republican Party Chairman Matt Borges yesterday, and he was very confident that the amount left to be raised is going to be very easy. And as Diane mentioned, they're farther ahead than past host cities have been at this point in the process. And, they're basically down to the last few big gets or asks that they need to make. So take that for what it's worth.
And then I wanted to ask Chris, the Trump people were in town last week. I know that I was one of the reporters who had a lot of fun waiting for them to arrive outside the office. Yeah, and you walked in and everybody's like, who's that guy? So can you talk a little bit about what those conversations have been like and kind of how this might unfold as they kind of settle into their role as being the presumptive nominee?
Yeah, last week's meetings were far less sexy or interesting than anybody hoped they would be, I think, at least from the outside. I think the basic way to explain last week's meetings is we have been working at the COA and the host committee even longer than that for a year or more already on planning this thing, and we were up to 70 employees, and there's 16 different departments and directors that are going on. It's a lot of stuff that's been done in the last year. Donald Trump just became the presumptive nominee. Most of last week's conversations were frankly about filling him in on what we've been doing for the last year, not as much planning going forward. I mean, before the Trump campaign can integrate fully, they have to understand kind of where we are, how we came to the decisions we came to, what we're doing, looking at all the venues. The kind of coordinated planning going forward will start occurring now. But at last week's meetings, frankly, we're just all about getting the Trump campaign up to speed on what we've been doing.
So Henry, how do you think Donald Trump will affect the coverage of the convention, and kind of what do you think we can expect?
Well, it's going to be, it'll be definitely covered from, I mean, look at this year's election coverage in general. It's unlike, any in recent year, and I think it's, you could draw a direct line to Donald Trump for that. He's, a reality television star. He's a colorful businessman. He knows how to work the media is probably, sounds like a pejorative phrase, but he knows, he understands media. He understands what gets attention. He has an acute sense of that better than, your most successful politician. He knows that if he tweets something on social media in this culture, that alone will earn him as much free media, more free media than John Kasich standing up and giving a policy speech at a college in New Hampshire. And so regardless of your opinion on Donald Trump and his politics and his attitude, he's been very successful in how he's marketed his campaign. And I think that that's going to translate into the convention. There's been talk of him, I don't know how much of this is just wild speculation or is based on conversations other reporters have had with people in his orbit. But I mean, could you imagine a convention where typically the nominee, they may show up and wave the night that the vice president gets nominated, and then they come back and give their speech the following night? Could you imagine Donald Trump giving a speech all 4 nights in prime time at the convention? There's nothing that says he can't. He's a television star in his own right. He knows what the cameras want. He knows what the reporters want. So and look, I'm a reporter, and I sometimes shake my head at what people in my profession have done when they cover this election. But I think Donald Trump is going to set the terms of what the coverage is of this convention. He knows what a lot of these cameras are going to want. It's not just going to be local and state and national press. It's going to be international media, and they're all going to come here for the show. And I think Donald Trump is going to give them what they came for.
Chris, how much say does a candidate have or a nominee have over the process?
I mean, quite a bit. I mean, obviously there's the mechanics of the convention, of course, that frankly have all been determined for the most part, where the nominee typically injects him or herself is the program, who speaks, what they say, how much time individuals get, and generally speaking, what the message is coming out, what the larger theme is that is trying to be pushed. I mean, that's, and then of course you make accommodations for the nominee on things like hotel and their guests and things like that. But for the most part, it's program and theme and message that ultimately they have a big part on.
So this is kind of out in no particular order because I'm just kind of thumbing through these cards. It says, the ride on the RTA Rapid from the airport to downtown is very unsightly. Is anything being done to leave a better impression on visitors to Cleveland?
Actually, yes. There will be a series of cleanups that we're actually are beginning this Saturday and will continue, I think, every weekend through the convention. RTA is running those. We'll be pushing out the specifics of that a little bit later this week. But there will also be cleanup sponsored by ODOT near the to pick up debris near the highways. So in addition to the volunteer cleanups, RTA is, as I understand it, doing, using heavy equipment to go in and take away some of the things that have been, have ended up by the tracks. So
next question, this is also airport related, sort of. Yes, the airport construction will be finished, but what is being done to prepare moving 50,000 people in a friendly, helpful, and efficient manner, especially by traffic control officers?
And unfortunately, that's a City of Cleveland airport question that I don't know the answer to, but I'm sure they're spending, they will do it, and they're spending a lot of time on working out the details.
Can you speak generally, Chris, about how kind of like what the ballet is of moving people from their hotels and just kind of the general transportation picture for a convention?
Yeah, we have our own busing system. So and it's worth mentioning, RTA was mentioned, but your normal trips on RTA are not going to be that affected because all the delegates and alternates and guests that are in all these hotel rooms spanning the span that we talked about, we have our own buses, and I think it's north of 325 buses or something like that, committed that are brought in, frankly, from the outside that are not robbing Peter to pay Paul here locally, and they are a self-contained unit moving those delegations to their events and then also to the convention hall, in this case the queue, and then back to their hotel. We're doing some things with them. There'll be a command and control center, GPS on all of those, so we'll be able to see where all those buses are at all the time, and there's training for the drivers. So as far as taking care of the people that are coming to and from, you're going to have well-trained drivers, you're going to have a command and control center that sees where all the buses are, buses, those routes are going to be pre-run, et cetera, et cetera. I think because we have to make it smooth as possible for those folks for the reasons you pointed out in Tampa. We want to make sure that we avoid those decisions because that's a big part of the experience.
So I can't answer these questions myself, I guess, as the moderator, but I think Diane might know something about there's volunteers that are going to have jobs that involve helping greet people at the airport and stuff like that?
Right. Again, as part of our site agreement, we agreed to recruit 8,000 volunteers, and they will be, there will be several shifts of volunteers at the airport starting the Friday before the convention. And then also, as delegates leave the following Friday, we'll have volunteers there. So lots of folks there, as well as I said, in the hotels and as wayfinders.
And these are people like you who care about the city and want that positive impression to be left. Mm-hmm. I've dealt with these folks when we've gone to other conventions, and it's a big part, that volunteer, the training that they get, it's a very big part, because you walk off that plane in an airport you've never been to that could be confusing. Your impression could be immediately positive or negative. And if you have somebody saying, it's great to see you, welcome to Cleveland, right down this way to baggage claim, if you have any questions, there'll be people with shirts like mine on all along the way. That's a big help. That's going to help the process.
I want to ask this question. I realize we can't answer it exactly, but it says, can a resident of, say, Shaker Heights get on the Rapid in the late afternoon and get off at Tower City to enjoy the ambience, as Diane suggested, without having to go through a security point?
Yes.
So how do you envision people coming downtown, and what kind of experience can they expect?
Well, I think taking RTA, the Rapid or a bus, is a good idea because parking will be at a premium. And it's really just to experience the delegates and the folks on the street and in the restaurants and walking through the arcade. So it's the new public square some of the nice attributes of that experience, but it's just seeing what downtown is going to be like while hosting a national political convention, something we haven't done in Cleveland since 1936.
So what, if any, plans are in place to continue the positive narrative after the convention is over? I.e., how do we convince our surrounding communities to be, quote, impressed too? And I'm sorry, Diane, I think this might be you again.
Well, I should say that the host committee, there are 7 staff on the host committee, but we work very closely with the staff at Destination Cleveland. And of course, they are the Greater Cleveland Convention and Visitors Bureau. And they have a plan, actually they're reaching out to all of the delegates now with a plan called Come for the Convention, Stay for the Unconventional, that highlights, the different parts of Northeast Ohio. So there are videos that talk about wine country in Lake County or Amish country or Cedar Point, and the islands. And, those are things that will continue to be highlighted as we continue to promote Greater Cleveland through their work, as I said, as our Convention and Visitors Bureau. So this is, again, a jumping off point for their programming, and they're seeking other conventions and meetings to come here.
And again, I'm sorry, Dan, I'm trying to move these around, but I'm actually frankly surprised it took this long to get this question. For home rentals, how much need still exists, and how far away from downtown is an acceptable location?
Well, I'm going to just give how you can put your home up for rent, and then Chris is going to talk to the need part. So early on, we said publicly, that we're working with Howard Hanna. So if you want to list your home for the convention, you would go on their website and be guided to the place where you can list your home. I haven't heard a lot about the matching process, but Chris?
And we're the same way. We've been telling people, if you want to put your home, you want to have that considered, go to Airbnb. So Howard Hanna, Airbnb,
Okay.
Either one. The Committee on Arrangements does not, there's a reason why we have 16,000 hotel rooms. And it will accommodate pretty much everybody that, I don't say we care about, but that we plan on, we plan on accommodating in the course of a normal convention. And this is, as soon as Cleveland got the convention, literally as soon, that is the most common question that I get from friends and family. And it's, hey, I've got a great house in Solon. I'm only going to ask for about 1 year's worth of mortgage. What do you think? And I don't take any joy in this, but it's becoming something. I really feel it's important to kind of level set. If you have a house in Solon, or the mayor of Vermilion, I grew up in Vermilion, Ohio, and the mayor, good friend of mine, called me and said, got a bunch of great houses out here. What do you think? What I tell everybody is, how many nice houses are there between you and the queue that are also willing to have people give them away or rent them out for the week, et cetera? If you have a condo or an apartment downtown, potentially in Ohio City, I do see some demand. If you have a house in Solon or Shaker Heights or Bay Village where I live, I don't think there's going to be that much demand. And it's just by sheer virtue of the fact that we're starting with 16,000 hotel rooms that we're providing to people.
I'm going to pepper Henry with a few questions now. I guess, do you think that the Republican National Convention, let's say we were to host the Super Bowl in Cleveland, which, unless our weather gets nicer, doesn't seem very likely. There's a lot of people here, but you don't have political protesters, you don't have the Secret Service. So there's just a lot of trouble that goes into this event that kind of goes beyond just your normal giant thing happening. Henry, so do you think this is worth the trouble for Cleveland? Or, what's on the balance sheet for you?
I think it's, I don't know if it's up to me to say whether it was worth it or not. I mean, there's a lot of variables that go into it, but I certainly think that it's a like I said earlier, it's potential to be a hugely positive thing for the city going forward. I mean, there's a reason so many cities compete to host these conventions. I'm sure if you asked the folks in Columbus, they would be happy to take this one off our hands, and they'd be happy to take the Democratic convention off of Philadelphia's hands. But Columbus is maybe a good example of where Cleveland was in the run-up to the 2008 convention that went to Minneapolis and St. Paul. I mean, it's a city that still has to grow its hotel capacity downtown. I'm talking about Columbus, that doesn't quite have the connectivity that Cleveland has gained. And back when the RNC toured Cleveland in 2006, I had just recently come to the Plain Dealer at the time. I mean, it was, everybody in Cleveland was really excited and hopeful, but I think that a lot of the community stakeholders recognized that it wasn't their year because they still didn't have that new convention center, and they think that was right at the time they were starting to build the Euclid corridor out. I mean, there's a really nice new hotel on East 9th and Euclid, the Schofield. It's a Kimpton hotel that was like an empty, beat up, ugly building back in 2006, as were a lot of the buildings on Euclid Avenue. The new county administration building, I mean, Ameritrust, there wasn't Heinen's then. So, I mean, I'm kind of avoiding your question, but I think that there is, because I don't want to make a value judgment on what this means for Cleveland in the long run, but I do think that there's certainly a lot to show off here, and it could definitely be a positive.
So, Henry, do you see any, what do you see as kind of the political effect of this whole thing?
Great question. I was actually looking at some of this earlier. Having the Democratic convention in Charlotte, North Carolina, did not help the Democrats win North Carolina again in 2012. They had actually picked up North Carolina in the 2008 election and then lost it in 2012. And having the Republican convention in Tampa did not help the Republicans carry Florida. And if you look throughout history, it's not a real measurable gain politically. I mean, I think that there's always this sense that a city is a contender because it could help in the fall. And I'm sure that Reince Priebus would say, yeah, this could help us carry Ohio in the fall. But I don't think that's likely, but I think that what the Republicans are doing, and Chris will probably say I'm right and agree with me, they're trying to make inroads in urban areas and inner cities. There has been some legitimate outreach from the RNC and the Ohio Republican Party and the Cuyahoga County Republican Party on this score. And I think they feel in some parts, by showcasing, a city like Cleveland that has rebounded in recent years, that helps them tell that story. I think that it's more than just that, and I think there's some of the on-the-ground political efforts to do that. I also think that perhaps if you build excitement in some of the exurban areas like Medina County and Lake County and Avon Lake, and then you kind of maybe are running up the score in some of these traditionally Republican suburbs that could be helpful in the fall.
So I've got another question for you, Henry.
Okay, great.
Do you have any thoughts on who some vice presidential candidates might be?
Wow. This is a good question. I think that there's a lot of misdirection coming from the Trump campaign on this. I mean, when you send Ben Carson out there to answer the questions, you're bound to have some misdirection. And I think he named 4 people, including Sarah Palin, which I'm sure that some people weren't thrilled about. And then Donald Trump came out and said, the Washington Post reported the names that Ben Carson gave them, and then the Trump people came out and said that 2 of those names weren't even on the list. So I'll tell you who I don't think it's going to be. There's been a lot of speculation about John Kasich. No one says they want to be vice president. It's not a job you run for, and it's only been in modern times that vice presidents have had a significant visible amount of power, like Dick Cheney and Joe Biden, and to an extent Al Gore. But that wasn't until maybe Al Gore, that wasn't really the case for vice presidents. John Kasich doesn't want it. I think he's really struggling with how to decide what he does with Donald Trump. Does he even endorse him? I don't know. I think names like Newt Gingrich you're going to hear, because Newt Gingrich is always just a phone call away, and is somebody that would have the combination of governing experience and a little bit of foreign policy heft that Donald Trump doesn't have. Also is somebody that would be willing to do it, and I think that that's a problem Donald Trump might face. I mean, Marco Rubio and maybe even Ted Cruz are people that you'd love to have on the ticket, because you balance out the older guy that doesn't have political experience with a younger person who sort of sets up the party's future. And Rubio and Cruz's case, a Hispanic American, which is an area in which Trump, look, this is reality, needs all the help he can get. But Cruz and Rubio want to probably run for president again in 2020, and if they're worried that aligning with Donald Trump hurts that, they're going to try to find ways to say no delicately. In my estimation of the calculus. So I don't know. I'm going to tell you this, and then you're all going to think I'm a genius if I'm right, because I told one of my editors this the other day. Oklahoma Governor Mary Fallin. That's my wild card pick for Donald Trump's running mate. So when he announces her, you can all remember, you heard it from me. It's probably not going to be her. Mary, make sure you put that in the story, so I'm judged as a genius later on.
One last political question for you, Henry. So you said that Donald Trump was able to catch on because he really understood how to kind of take advantage of the media environment. Why do you think some of the other candidates, failed to really grasp onto that? I mean, and you had obviously our own governor, who I think in a lot of other years, it looks a lot like the kind of person who ends up kind of seizing the nomination. So what do you think happened with some of the people who didn't make the cut?
I think part of it's, I think the other candidates just did not understand the current media climate as well as Donald Trump did. And they also didn't understand the mood of the electorate in the way that Donald Trump did. And I keep using him as an example because I cover him on a regular basis, but Governor Kasich, as you said, has a great resume, and any other year you'd think this is the guy that the Republicans would want to rally around. But they don't want to rally around a guy that spent, 18 years in Congress and is, in a second term as governor. I mean, to a lot of these voters who are angry, he represents everything that they don't want this year. And then you got a guy who's able to get his message out on TV and the news on a regular basis, who is tapping into that frustration in Donald Trump. So I just think that it's a unique time. I think the fact that the field started out so large helped Donald Trump to sort of run up the middle, where others were trying the more conventional ways of campaigning. Donald Trump had sort of his own lane all to himself, and he took advantage of that. And then when he saw guys like Marco Rubio try to fight Trump style, it looked inauthentic, and it looked like everything Trump had been saying was wrong with politics. And he very brilliant at marketing himself in that way.
Chris, does the fact that we have a number of high-profile Republicans saying that they're not coming to this convention, including how many of the living presidential nominees, Henry?
I think Bob Dole's the one that's coming.
Right. Does that pose any challenges, for staging, a stable platform and whatever it is that you guys say that you do with Republican conventions?
I think it's a story that people, the press will write about, but does it pose any challenges for the convention? No. I mean, the story will be about our nominee and the message coming out of the convention. You will not hear, I don't think, any of that in the lead up to the convention when we actually get here. It's one of those things. I think that to fill some space in advance. But as far as putting on the convention, running the convention, getting the message out from the convention, no, I don't think so.
So Henry, I know I said I wasn't going to ask you more political questions, but I got one here from the audience. If the Cavaliers win, do you think LeBron James will be a vice presidential nominee?
I have an easy answer to this question. I don't think and it's a nerdy one though, but I don't think he's constitutionally eligible because he's not yet 35 years old. And so he would not be able to serve if something happened to President Trump.
So this is kind of for everyone down the line. What's the most common question that you get from your friends when you tell them that you're working on this?
I don't think everybody quite understands what I do, and so I get asked for free tickets to Indians and Cavs games a lot, which I mean if I had I probably wouldn't be here right now. Everybody asks me about Donald Trump, my mother-in-law, my father-in-law, my cousins, and I'm like, realized that the Ohio governor is also running for president, and I cover him and travel with him on a regular basis, and they didn't even know that John Kasich was running for president. So, but number one question is about Trump for me.
I think my number one is, can I buy a ticket to get into the queue and watch some of the proceedings?
Yeah, how much does this cost?
It's how do I rent my house for a year's worth of mortgage?
So another question I wanted to ask everybody down the line is, what does it mean for you personally? Everybody here is either from this area. I think Diane, are you from here, or you've just been here, for most of your career, right? So what is, as either people have deep roots, in Northeast Ohio, what does it mean for you personally to be working on this?
It's cool because I really do. I mean, at the root of everything, enjoy what I do. I love politics. I love writing. Covering politics in a town like Cleveland was great enough before, because you had so many colorful characters, some of whom are no longer with us because they, have numbers on their clothes. But to cover a major political convention in the city where you work, regardless of partisan politics, it's I won't lie, it's going to be a great experience for me, professionally and personally.
Yeah, and I came to Cleveland after I graduated from college, and I've had the opportunity to work for Mayor Voinovich when I started at City Hall when the city was in default. Also worked for Mayor White, and so I've seen, our town at maybe perhaps not its best, and now I have the opportunity to show off Cleveland 2016. And for me, someone who came and stayed and met my husband here and raised my family here, it's just a moment of immense pride, and it's a real honor to be part of this.
Yeah, very, very similar to Diane. It's a very personal and proud moment. After college, after John Carroll, I lived in Toledo, I lived in Columbus, I lived in Washington, D.C., and at the end of a 20-year political career, Cleveland gets the convention, and as it turns out, kind of all these things ran together. My oldest son was going to be going into kindergarten this past fall. It was the perfect opportunity to move home and raise my kids in the basically the same environment that I did, which was a dream come true to promote Cleveland. And I can't help but think about the fact my mom's parents were from the Cam's Corner area off Rocky River Boulevard on West Park, and I've been there. I was at the Drive game, right? I did as a kid. I was a senior in high school, and through all those same struggles of not our best foot forward. So the opportunity to come home, raise my family here, and be part of promoting that next generation of Cleveland is a dream come true.
So I don't know if anybody wants to answer this last question, or when any particular person wants to grab it, but it's just on my list here, and I think it's a good question. What's next for Cleveland after this? I think that, I'm not trying to make Diane answer this question, but I think it's interesting that she helped manage the construction of what's now First Energy Stadium, and I think that the loss of the Browns and then bringing them back with something else that kind of similarly seized a lot of the civic energy in Cleveland, and it affected people kind of on a, almost like a psychic level or something like that. And I don't think the Republican convention is quite at that level, but at the same time, it is something that a lot of different elements of the community have to rally around. And so I don't know if then when you're helping with the stadium project, if you'd picture, we're going to be doing a Republican National Convention in 10 years. But, does anybody have, I guess, a response, just sort of like, what's the outlook for Cleveland from here after we get through this thing?
Does Cleveland want another convention if this one goes well? I mean, there's cities that host them semi-frequently, and if they, does Cleveland make the cut for a Democratic convention down the line? And once you've had one, probably want another.
Well, I think we have to, sometimes we are our own worst enemies, because we don't think of ourselves perhaps living in a world-class city, or we don't promote Cleveland as much as we should. And so for me, I think I see this as a jumping off point where we can all take forward a great pride in accomplishment, not only of the convention, but everything that has been done to work up to it. And again, it's, if we think of it as just those 4 days in July, we've lost the moment and we've lost the future. It's a springboard to that future, to promoting Cleveland and Northeast Ohio.
And I'm an optimist. I understand what Henry's saying, but I think the convention is going to go well. And having hosted a world-class event, what is ahead of Cleveland is world-class opportunities.
I've kind of burned through everything I think that I came prepared with, and the Cavs are playing at 8:30, so we might as well call it there. All right, thanks, everyone.